Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our webinar for the RGGI Strategic Funding Plan Development. My name is Christine Schell, and I work for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. With me today in the room are Mike Winka from the Board of Public Utilities.
Good morning.
And joining us shortly will be Jonathan Ratner from the Economic Development Authority. They're both in the room to answer your questions regarding the presentation that we'll walk through in a moment. This webinar is a culmination of our public outreach and education regarding the development of a strategic funding plan for the distribution of the RGGI auction proceeds. The webinar is being recorded for posterity and will be posted on the NJ.gov/RGGI website in a few days for future information. Up on the screen right now is the agenda that we'll be following. We'll walk through a presentation that contains a lot of information. If you've been to any of our workshops over the last month and a half, some of the presentation will be very familiar to you, but we've also added some information to the presentation that outlines how some of the comments that we've been hearing from the public during our tour of New Jersey for this effort. And then we will take questions. The slide up now shows you how to leave a question or comment for us. Please enter your name and the organization you represent, and those comments and questions will be collected, and then we will address them at the end of the presentation. You can also send your thoughts and comments to the NJDEP-RGGI email until the end of today, when the comment period will close. So welcome. Again, we are on our last public outreach initiative here. We did 4 workshops throughout the last month and a half, and the slide you're looking at shows where and when we hosted those. All the information from those workshops are posted on our website at nj.gov/RGGI if you're interested in looking at the previous information that we've shared. In terms of outreach, in order to get people to come to our workshops or register for this webinar, we did 71 social media posts and had well over 100,000 impressions and well over 750 engagements with those. Over 230 people registered for the various workshops. And there have been a number of email submissions to us for those people who couldn't attend any of our public events. For a feedback mechanism through those workshops, we took a number of different approaches to make sure that people were comfortable with providing us information on the scoping document that we released at the end of October. We took written forums. We had dot voting at 3 out of the 4 of the workshops. We did facilitated breakout sessions. And again, up through the end of today, we're continuing to accept email submissions. So just some background on RGGI itself. We in New Jersey have a long history with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. In 2005, then Governor Cody joined with 6 other states to sign a memorandum of understanding to create the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Over the next several years, as one of the founding members, New Jersey State Legislature gave us authorizing statutes to implement the program, and we developed rules here at the department of Environmental Protection to implement that program. We participated in the first 3 years of the program, or one control cycle. And then in 2012, then Governor Christie determined to pull the state out of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, citing his perception that it was a tax that did not have any meaningful reductions in greenhouse gas initiatives. Governor Murphy, as one of his first acts in 2008, signed Executive Order Number 7, directing both the department and the Board of Public Utility to take all steps necessary to re-engage us in RGGI, which we did. The department adopted 2 rules in June of this year. And we are set to rejoin RGGI as a full partner and participate in our first auction in March of 2020. A little bit about how RGGI works. It is a regional greenhouse gas emission cap that is established by the states that are participating. The states offer allowances for sale in quarterly auctions, and the electric generating units that are subject to the program are required to purchase allowances equal to their emissions for a 3-year control period. Those regulated entities are the fossil fuel electric generating units generating 25 megawatts or more electricity that is going to the grids in the various states. The states then receive the funding back from those quarterly auctions to reinvest in greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies and energy efficiency initiatives. The question we get asked the most, how much money are we talking about? Our best guess for 2020 is $80 million. That's in 4 pots over the year. That means that based on the breakdown for the various agencies that get the money through statutory requirements, EDA would get $48 million, BPU would get $16 million, and the DEP would get 2 pots of $8 million to spend in 2020. So why are you participating with us here this morning? The Global Warming Solutions Fund rule, which we adopted here at the department in June, requires the 3 agencies that are statutorily mandated to distribute the funds to coordinate to use the RGGI funds through a strategic funding plan developed at least every 3 years. The goal of the agencies is to work together towards common goals and find ways to complement and amplify the state funding in ways that will help us to meet our climate and clean energy goals, and to ensure the investment is made to protect our most vulnerable populations. This is the last opportunity for the public to weigh in on how we will prioritize the funding to most benefit communities and New Jersey as a whole. The funding plan framework includes a transparent exercise, which as I've mentioned previously, have been going through for the last month and a half, hosting public meetings to both educate the public about the funding requirements and to gather input. Once we have all the input, the state agencies will identify the initiatives they want to sponsor during the corresponding funding period. We are required by regulation to rank those initiatives against 6 objectives, and I will go through those objectives in a moment. Each objective must be ranked critical to at least 1 initiative. And then for future strategic plans, the department and its sister agencies are required to report out on the previously funded projects and programs to determine the success of the implementation. So this is a very busy slide, which just gives you a breakdown of how the 3 agencies are legislatively mandated to spend the money. Our sister agency, the Economic Development Authority, or EDA, gets 60% of the funds, and their lane is to invest that in commercial, institutional, and industrial entities to support programs that direct end-use energy efficiency programs, state-of-the-art technology, development of offshore wind and carbon abatement programs. Our sister agency, the Board of Public Utilities, gets 20% of the funding. Their lane is the low income and moderate income residential sector, and their goal is to reduce electricity demand or reduce the cost of electricity to their customers, with a focus on the urban areas of the state. Department of Environmental Protection gets 2 pots of money. 10% of the proceeds would go to a local government grant program that would help our local governments throughout the state plan and develop measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then we also get 10% of the money to enhance our stewardship and restoration of forests and tidal marshes, which are naturally sequestering carbon in the state of New Jersey. So the 6 objectives, which I'll go through individually in a second, 5 of those come directly from our authorizing legislation, the Global Warming Solutions Fund Act. And then the 6th one comes from Executive Order 7 from Governor Murphy and has been elevated to that level because of the importance that Governor Murphy places on the issue of disproportionately impacted communities. So the first objective is a net reduction in greenhouse gas emissions or net carbon sequestration. As you can see from the slide, the graphic shows our latest greenhouse gas inventory for 2018, highlighting that the largest sector is transportation by far, followed by electric generation, and then commercial and industrial sectors, then residential, and then the rest of the sectors. At the bottom, the green bar headed in the other direction is what we are benefiting from our natural sequestration through our forests and marshes. The strategic funding plan objective 2 is to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions or energy demand and or significantly contribute to the achievement of the state's 2050 Global Warming Response Act limit. That limit is an 80% reduction from 2006 levels of emissions in the state of New Jersey. And the graphic on this slide gives you a sense of where we've been, where we are, and that tiny little dot at the bottom of where we need to get by 2050. So just giving you some visual on where what the goals are. One more thing on this slide before we leave it. The terminology and all of the objectives can be interpreted differently depending on who you are. The scoping document included an appendix that talks through each of the objectives in terms of how the 3 state agencies would interpret the terminology when they're making the determination as to whether an initiative is critical or beneficial to an objective. Objective 3 is the reduction of energy use in New Jersey. The slide that you're looking at now shows New Jersey's primary energy consumption from 1960 to 2016 and the breakdown of the different sources of that energy to give you a sense of the goal of transitioning over to renewable energy and also reducing our energy consumption in the state. The 4th objective is to be directly responsive to recommendations that the agencies have already made to the legislature and the governor of the state pursuant to the Global Warming Response Act. 10 or so more years ago, the department did submit a recommendations report for 2020. And so any viable recommendations within that could be considered, but more recently, we expect to submit the energy master plan by the end of this year to go final from our Board of Public Utilities. And then in the middle of next year, we at the department will finalize a Global Warming Reduction Response Act 2050 report, which will piggyback on that energy master plan and also provide recommendations for the non-energy sectors that contribute to our greenhouse gas emission problem. Objective 5 is to provide co-benefits to the state. The legislation does call out some examples, but does not limit us to those examples. So some of the examples in legislation are to provide health benefits, jobs within the state, reduce other more traditional air pollutants like ozone, or to benefit the environment in other ways or reduce other sources of environmental pollution. And then the sixth objective from the Executive Order 7 is to be directly responsive to the negative effects on human health and the environment in communities that are disproportionately impacted by the effects of environmental degradation and climate change. The very busy map that you see is a tool that we here at the department recently released through our AIR program called What's in Your Community, and gives a sense of what the major sources and minor sources of air pollution are within a neighborhood. So you can see in the area that we're focusing on that there's a lot of existing sources in some of our most vulnerable populations in New Jersey. The governor's funding priorities should be no surprise for anyone who's watched the administration over the last 2 years, but are to focus on electrification of the transportation sector in New Jersey, that being our largest source of greenhouse gas emissions needs to be concentrated on, and also to provide meaningful benefits to the communities that are most vulnerable to pollution and climate change. So this slide just gives you a sense of what our scoping document that we released at the end of October is and what it is not. It is a tool that we are using to educate the public about our legal and regulatory framework surrounding the distribution of RGGI auction proceeds. It provides example initiatives, which we will go through shortly, that put that framework into context for the public, and it does explain the governor's priorities. The scoping document is not a draft strategic funding plan, and it is not a summary of the final initiatives that will be funded by the state agencies. So now we're going to walk through quickly each of the 7 example initiatives that the department included in its scoping document. And then we are also going to go through some of the feedback that we've been hearing over the last month and a half at the workshops that we've been hosting. So the first initiative is clean transportation. It seeks to accelerate transportation electrification in the state, focusing specifically on the areas of our state that are disproportionately impacted by the effects of pollution and climate change. This program could, if included in a final strategic plan, be sponsored by both the DEP and the EDA. Some of the programs that could be incorporated under an initiative like this would be to electrify jitneys in urban areas, to coordinate with rideshare programs, to get people where they're going in cleaner transportation. We could also work to implement programs that would do last mile transportation to various areas in those communities. On our tour of New Jersey for this purpose, we've heard specifically with relation to this initiative that the public is supportive of transportation initiatives, would like to see electrification of public transportation in those urban areas, increased access to public charging stations or hubs. They have noted that there's been no mention of last mile solutions like bike lanes and smart growth. There also have been some comments about land use type opportunities, so making Transit Village and Main Street, New Jersey programs more proactive. And then there's been an emphasis on decarbonizing the freight transportation and requiring electrification hookup for the trucks at warehouses and ports. The next initiative is a New Jersey Green Bank. It seeks to increase the pace of clean energy investment through the creation of a green bank in New Jersey. The funding would be dedicated to organizing and capitalizing the bank. Although there is no uniform playbook for starting a green bank, there are some core principles that all the banks that have been implemented share. They use public money to leverage private lenders to get them to support and lend to clean energy projects. They help to de-risk transactions of the private lenders so they can cover a portion of a loan if there's a problem. They can help streamline the funding process by developing standard forms of documentation for private lenders. They all lend in areas where there is where the market is unable or unwilling to lend. So supporting those areas. How the funding is dispersed can vary across a green bank. They can establish a standard set of requirements a borrower has to meet, or they can fund project-oriented proposals or pilot projects. So all of those could be considered in the creation of a green bank here in New Jersey. So the exact structure and product set for this type of a bank will be determined if it was selected for final inclusion in a strategic funding plan. Some of the comments that we've been hearing on the Green Bank are that incentives should follow manufacturing of solar panels in New Jersey, focus on the supply chain for offshore wind, manufacturing of electric trucks and subcomponent parts, nuclear energy, development of community financial institutions, and moving private industry towards clean energy. There have been some concerns about duplication with the iBank in New Jersey that have been expressed by the public. Initiative 3 is a BPU lead initiative that seeks to reduce electricity consumption in low and moderate income households through the development and implementation of a community clean energy microgrid program. The program would lower cost and electricity use through a holistic approach, pairing community solar, microgrid development, and energy efficiency programs. It would provide a competitive grant to a municipality. The municipality would apply for funding for the community solar project combined with a microgrid. At a minimum, the municipality will be required to identify the neighborhood for such a program and a critical facility that would be connected to the microgrid. And the residents in the neighborhoods would benefit by retaining some ownership of the community solar project, but also get reduction on their energy bill. Residents in the neighborhoods that are selected that are in the Universal Service Fund, which is a BPU program, would automatically be opted into such a program. And the program would also deliver efficiency programs to the neighborhoods through the BPU's Comfort Programs Partnership. Some feedback we've been hearing about this initiative is that community solar for low and moderate income areas is very much needed. That many residents from environmental justice communities rent, and so there's some difficulty for them in having access to renewable energy, which is a concern that would have to be addressed in such a program. There is a need for energy efficiency projects in residential sectors in terms of insulation, windows, and boilers. We've heard a lot about vehicle to grid technology and its inclusion in such a program, and that the microgrid should be limited to renewable power sources only. The fourth initiative would be a DEP lead if selected to get to net zero energy solutions for waste management initiative. This initiative would reduce emissions specifically from waste disposal. If you remember back to my slide on the greenhouse gas emissions for 2018, waste was kind of next on the list of emissions after transportation and the energy using sectors and energy generating sectors. So in order to meet that green 2050 dot on the slide of our greenhouse gas goal, all the sectors would need to be addressed in some way. So this initiative would seek to figure out ways to remove the organic waste from our landfills and put that organic waste to use in some way that could help us generate clean energy, biogas, and other resources. With respect to this initiative, we've heard comments that are supportive of waste to energy efforts that are taking place in other countries. Biogas and landfill gas that can be upgraded to use as CNG quality and used for transportation. We've heard some information about funding municipalities to invest in the collection of organic waste as a way to get a source for that energy. And then industrial composting at multi-unit residential buildings and large industrial facilities and academic centers. The fifth and sixth initiatives both focus on the natural sequestration of carbon in New Jersey. The first focusing on our forests, and the second focusing on our what we call blue carbon, or our marshlands in New Jersey. And both of these are very similar initiatives that seek to promote and protect and maintain the benefits that we have from those natural resources. If you again remember the graphic that we showed earlier about the greenhouse gas greenhouse gas emission inventory, that the green bar that was doing us benefit is about 8% of our greenhouse gas are being sequestered. That is larger than the waste sector at 5% of our inventory. So this is not an insignificant amount of benefits that we're receiving, and there are truly a number of other benefits happening with respect to our forests and our marshes. These initiatives both seek to support programs already in place that protect these resources and seek to expand or create templates for successful programs that are being used in our urban areas and coastal areas. So for Initiative 5, some of the things we've been hearing on the forest side of things is that urban reforestation projects are needed and need to be continuously reinforced in those urban areas. They provide many co-benefits in terms of stormwater management, reducing urban heat islands, and removing pollutants from the urban environment. They should be used to support the projects that preserve our intact contiguous forests and not fragment our forests. And that forest inventory should identify where the processes are working well and how to designate these areas for protection. And also, we heard some comments about restorative agriculture. I talked about these together, so we'll just go to the comments. What we're hearing on blue carbon is that this sequestration has the highest carbon removal potential, but the shortest timeline to be implemented due to sea level rise impacts from climate change, and that we need an added focus of wetland resiliency, to benefit restoring them in conjunction with carbon sequestration. We hear comments about dredging and how it should have a more focused place placed on it in terms of restoration, sampling, and procedures that go into it, and assistance to the municipalities with respect to that. Much of the attention has been given to the coast, and the Delaware Bay shore has been overlooked and needs more attention. And again, like forestry, the co-benefits of restoring our wetlands are numerous, including protection from hurricanes, and that the final plan needs to emphasize this more if intensive storms are going to continue to happen as a result of climate change. The final initiative, example initiative that we included in our scoping document is the strengthening of clean tech innovation. Then this would be an NJDEP lead if it were included, and could provide funding and in-kind assistance to strengthen the clean tech innovation of the state of New Jersey. Two areas where the funding could be focused or dedicated. One would be to support the economy and business sector level by including funds to create better incubator facilities in New Jersey, or to provide more business savvy or entrepreneur skills to improve business community fundraising and marketing. On another level, this type of funding could support individual businesses by providing those companies with their funding to get to the next stage of their development. A lot of smaller businesses have difficulty kind of getting over the hump to the next phase. So this could be a way to support that seed money. And then this could also overcome a funding gap in a more developmental program or company to invest in a program or company in its earlier stages. Some of the comments that we've been hearing with respect to this last initiative is that there's a need for multi-institutional innovative centers that include academia, government, and industry. Some suggestion to create a framework where the government and the recipients of the funding would require local jobs in the state of New Jersey. That wind farms could be the best opportunities for job creation and should be prioritized in the state. Prioritization of the incentives of startup ventures that do not rely on animal agriculture. And then a focus on energy consumption and energy generation. Okay, so that was a lot of information. We did say that all of these incentives are not, this is not the final or draft strategic funding plan, but let's just say for a moment that it is. Let's say everybody on this webinar loves our initiatives and we decide as this to go forward with those 7 initiatives. This slide just demonstrates how the state agencies would rank those initiatives, with the C meaning critical towards the objectives that we walked through earlier. And as you can see from this, we have created in the scoping document a suite of initiatives that holistically meet all 6 objectives. So there's critical across and down, making sure that we're meeting or we have a plan that meets all of our objectives. Just a few slides on some of the additional feedback we heard as we were walking around hopping around the state. We heard a lot of information specifically related to environmental justice, to make sure that language is clear, that the emission reductions are happening in the EJ communities, and that we must foster true ownership with the program and the project. That's some similar feedback to what the BPU has heard and went into the creation of their initiative for the community clean energy microgrid. Many of the residents from Newark, for example, talked about the concept of renting homes and the impact of how difficult that is with respect to renewable energy. Again, something we need to address. To make sure that the materials are available in multiple languages and make clean transportation applicable to the EJ communities specifically. Another category that we had a lot of feedback on is how we would determine our metrics for success. I'm not going to walk through all of these on the slide, but a lot of them should feel very familiar in terms of other programs and projects that the agencies do in terms of measuring their success. So improved air quality, reduction in fuel consumption, reduction in the cost of energy, reduced emissions, looking at things from a project by project basis, and not kind of trying to do an umbrella for all of the projects. So a lot of really good information that we will take back to the state agencies. We did hear a lot of comments related to economic co-benefits specifically, and discussion of making sure that there's job creation along with the funding, with projects that we're funding, that those jobs are created here in New Jersey, that we create apprenticeships and include prevailing wages when we create those programs, and work with the higher education and community colleges on high-tech vehicles, to supply chain jobs for wind would be a good supply chain jobs for wind would be a good job creator for New Jersey, and that the installation of EV chargers will require more electricians and fewer mechanics, and so there's a job shifting as we move to green energy. And then the last large overarching category that we heard a lot of information on from the public is our outreach and education, making sure that students and our younger population understand the importance of clean energy, because they will grow up to be responsible for these initiatives and be more responsible because of that education. Finding ways to work with Sustainable Jersey and other resources in the state that will support the communities, to coordinate the agencies to sync up dates with initiative deadlines, and agencies should work together on all the initiatives for the greater benefit of all, which is one of the underwriting drivers of the strategic plan, to make sure that agencies continue to walk in lockstep. Suggestion of some community ambassadors who are trained to talk about the programs and projects and better educate the public, and to create a crowdsource funding campaign as a way for the public to donate to the RGGI program. So finally, the timeline. If you are on this webinar, you are participating in the last dot before we start to develop that final strategic funding plan. That plan is due 30 days after we receive the first allocation of RGGI proceeds, and that auction takes place in March of 2020. So the deadline is April of 2020 for the final strategic funding plan to be released, and that plan will guide our investments over the next 3 years until December of 2022. Unless at any point any of the agencies determine that we need to come back to the table earlier and rediscuss our investments. So that was a lot of talking by me. So right now we're going to start to take some questions from the audience. The team here at DEP has been diligently tracking your questions, so they're going to read those questions out, and then Mike and Jonathan are going to help me answer them.
Okay, first question talks a bit about how RGGI funds, could they be used to protect and preserve our highland forests? Can RGGI dollars be used to encourage the division of forestry and wildlife not to clear cut hundreds of acres, but instead do more restorative activities and plant trees, for example, in post-agricultural lands?
So the short answer, without a forestry person in the room, is yes. The RGGI funds can be used to both protect our existing resources as well as to create new resources in areas, and to hopefully do that in a sustainable, strategic way through planning of our forest stewardship programs.
Next question, when is the deadline for submitting comments?
That would be the end of today. And you can do that through the NJRGGI email, which is njrggi@dep.nj.gov, and we will provide a slide at the end of this presentation that has that information on it as well.
Next question. The terrestrial forest carbon sink can't be taken for granted as forest health concerns like invasive plants, pests, and pathogens threaten this carbon savings account. Is sustainable forest management being considered as an eligible action to protect the New Jersey carbon sink?
Yes, the simple answer to that is yes. The forestry program is required to do sustainable and strategic planning, and this would be part of their action if it was an initiative that was included in RGGI, strategic funding plan.
Next question, this is from Aaron Cosgrove from the Energy Efficiency Alliance of New Jersey. With other state successes in RGGI implementing cost-effective energy efficiency programs, could New Jersey use the proceeds for more energy efficiency programs such as community retrofits, CPACE programs, and investing in an energy efficiency workforce development?
So we already run a low-income energy efficiency program. So the funds for the portion of the BPU portion of the allocation is 20% to be used for low and moderate income households, families, communities. So the Comfort Partners program is an existing program within the Clean Energy program. The current spend rate in that program is $35 million. We already reach about 5,000 to 6,000 households annually. So we already do that. We could put the RGGI funds into that program and expand that program. We would probably be able to expand that to, and again, if we do some sort of energy assistance program, energy efficiency program, we probably expand that to another 2,000 or so customers.
Great. Looks like one more question has come in. How will carbon emission benefits from forests projects be determined? I had previously read that the forest stewardship plans will qualify, but these do not necessarily have carbon benefits.
So the initiative is broad enough to encompass a number of different programs and projects. So should that initiative be included in the strategic funding plan at that point, the forestry program at DEP would determine which programs and projects would be encompassed underneath that initiative. They do, through legislation, they're required to tie that to the Forest Stewardship Act. And so I do believe that the forest stewardship plans that are put together do qualify for that funding, and I do believe that there's some talk of implementing ways to heighten the carbon benefits from those initiatives.
All right, some more questions. How will programs to reduce energy demand with RGGI funds interact with the new and ongoing energy docket at the BPU that requires electric utilities to reduce retail sales by a minimum of 2% a year? This question's from Eric Miller at NRDC.
So Mike Winka here from the BPU. So again, as I explained, we have a current low-income energy efficiency program. If we decide to expand that, that would be part of the Comfort Partners program. That Comfort Partners program is under the umbrella of the New Jersey Clean Energy Program. The docket on the energy efficiency sort of transition is still open. What programs are run by the utilities, what programs are overseen and managed by the BPU are still to be determined. I suggest you go to that docket and make your comments known about where you think those programs should best be managed and operated. There is a stakeholder meeting on Friday. You can go to the BPU website and see where that stakeholder meeting is, the time and place for that. I just want to also add a comment on the public comment period. So while the public comment period for the RGGI, for this portion of the RGGI strategic plan closes today, if the board were proceeding, if the BPU were proceeding with a strategic initiative, we would develop a straw proposal. We would go out for public comment on that straw proposal and then finalize that with an order. So there would be other successive comment periods that would be available beyond the strategic financing funding plan.
What will the process be to define and communicate grant application process for municipalities? This is from the Wyckoff Environmental Commission, Ben Weiner.
So depending on which initiatives are selected and included, and which ones DEP selects to focus its local government program on, we would either piggyback on an existing grant program, so no reinvestment or reinvention of the wheel. So for example, if that 10% were to go towards clean transportation initiatives, then the department already has an existing It Pays to Plug In initiative that could be leveraged to allow us to do grants for those types of projects. If other things are selected, then the department would develop a standalone grant program related to that. And then within the application process for that grant program, there would be the requirements that would have to be met in order to receive money from that grant program.
And if BPU proceeded with community clean energy microgrid, as we envision that would be a grant to municipalities. We would use several options to get that out. Typically, we use the League of Municipalities and then DCA in their blast email system to get information out, as well as the listservs that we use on the Clean Energy Program. So.
And to that point, there is a listserv currently for this initiative. It'll be the main vehicle that we use to get messaging out on the final plan, as well as other information that's coming out about grant programs and other mechanisms. So if you have not joined that listserv, you want to know where we're moving in terms of the funding, that would be your best source of information, and you can sign up for that right off the RGGI page, which again is nj.gov/RGGI.
Okay, a couple more have come in. Given that many municipalities in New Jersey need to build affordable housing, how can the RGGI funds be used to ensure that this necessary housing to be built to be net zero?
So we do have a current program for net zero homes under the Clean Energy Program. I'm not sure what the budget in that is. Off the top of my head, you can go in there. I'm not sure how we would do that, but that's an interesting question, and we can take that, we can consider that and take that under advisement and get an answer out to you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close the Q&A portion. I don't know, Jonathan, would you like to say something? No? EDA? All right, that's it for questions. So thank you. Christine.
Okay.
It's already too much. Yeah.
All that effort and then you didn't even flick to it.
Sorry.
Okay, so this is our last slide, unless any other questions come in while I'm doing it. So again, if you want to contact us, can be reached at njrggi@dep.nj.gov. Comments or input will close today, but if you continue to have questions, that website will continue to exist so that we can respond to you. Again, the nj.gov/RGGI website will include a recording of this webinar, as well as the presentation that we walk through with the summary information in it. And will continue to be updated as the state agencies move through the process of the development of the strategic funding plan. So,
can I add a supplemental to the question? So while,
of course,
we'd have to think about how we do that for building new affordable housing. All of those low-income houses in the neighborhood that would be selected within the community clean energy microgrid would basically be on the pathway to be a net zero home. So that's part of what we're developing within the community clean energy microgrid is those low income houses would get energy efficiency. They would get most of their electricity use delivered by the community solar project, which would put them on a pathway to be a net zero energy use home. So.
Anything else? Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. We at the DEP and our sister agencies wish you all a happy holidays and a good new year. And hopefully you will love our final strategic funding plan next year. Goodbye.